Well, hope you're having a pleasant afternoon. We're doing our first towing today in our 2023 Super Duty. It's working very well. We've got our gauges set up in what's called the towing gauges or something like that. And so that big tachometer on the left that's normally there is not there. And instead, it's you get to see your boost in PSI, which you don't on the dial. You get to see your engine brake percentage. You get to see your exhaust filter percentage, meaning how full it is. And you get to see the def level. And so we're going downhill on a pretty twisty road right now. And that exhaust brake is working very, very well. Exceptionally well.
In a quarter mile, turn left. There's
two different settings for it. And the first time you activate it, when you turn on, you press it, and I guess it activates in normal mode. And then you press the button again the second time on the dashboard there, and it activates in automatic mode. And we've had it in automatic mode, and it does a very good job. You can hear it downshifting. It does a very, very good job of controlling the speed of the truck and trailer, specifically when you're going downhill.
Turn left.
But what it doesn't do is help you slow down when you're coming up to a red light or a stop sign. It doesn't really do any good at all with that after you slow down past about 50, 40 miles an hour. And so you find yourself with this truck, again, when you're towing and when you're in tow haul mode with the exhaust brake activated or turned on, you wind up doing a lot of the braking yourself. And the exhaust brake, you can see on the dashboard there on the meter, right there, you can see it doing you can see it at 0% or 1%. And again, even when you're at 40 miles an hour and the light ahead of you suddenly turns red and you find yourself having to slow down in a hurry, you get on the brakes pretty hard, and the exhaust brake doesn't really do you a lot of good in a case like that. It doesn't really kick in. And that's a big difference from our 2011 Duramax. It's the LML, which is the previous version of the Duramax. We're on the L5P now. I should say Chevy is, or GM is. And that L5P has actually been revised twice now. Once in 2020, when they went to the new body style and the 10-speed automatic. It got heavily revised. Didn't actually improve its power and torque ratings, but it did improve the towing rating by a lot, because they added a bunch of extra cooling and much bigger radiator, bigger fan, which I guess is their excuse for why they had to make such an ugly looking front end on that 2020. But they also revised the L5P for 2024, and you can actually get a 2024 already, even though we're not even halfway through 23. It's a lot easier to get a 24 Duramax than it is to get a 23 Super Duty, ironically enough. But they have updated that engine a second time for 24, but they still call it the L5P. So for however many model years now, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's in its 8th model year of production, that engine, with 2 revisions, and it's still called the L5P, and that's fine. But the LML, the previous Duramax from 12 years ago, it just feels like the exhaust brake in that thing is a lot more aggressive and effective than the exhaust brake in the Power Stroke, the 6.7 Power Stroke. The 3.0 Power Stroke in our F-150 doesn't have an exhaust brake, and that's a glaring flaw in that truck that we've discussed on numerous occasions. And so on this one, on the 6.7 Power Stroke, I mean, at least it has one. And again, in a downhill, in a scenario where you're going downhill down a very, very steep slope, it does kick in aggressively. And on our way out this morning, we were going down, I don't know, this, an exceptionally steep slope with a truck that weighs 8,700 pounds and about a 5,000 pound trailer. It's not super heavy. It's our 28-foot Featherlite gooseneck, and that exhaust brake was holding this truck and trailer, and it had it like a steady 19 miles an hour, and was not letting it pick up speed on the downhill. And that's a tremendous feeling of security you get when your truck is working with you to keep you from getting into a very, very bad situation. And so it'll save your brakes on a steep downhill slope. What it won't do is save your brakes when all of a sudden the light ahead of you turns red and you're going like 50, 40 miles an hour, and you got to get on the brakes in a hurry to come to a stop. It doesn't really do anything for you in a case like that. And so you do find yourself having to use the brakes more than you would want to. The truck is surprisingly maneuverable. Again, for a gigantic 8,700 pound pickup truck with a dually rear end, and with it's very wide, it's very long, and yet the steering effort is surprisingly light, and you can kind of sort of like whip it around in very tight quarters when you need to, and it is a don't know if you just caught that exhaust brake was working real hard for us for a minute there. You can maneuver it very, very easily in bumper to bumper traffic and stop and go traffic when you're trying to maneuver through traffic and red lights and stop signs and tight turns and all that, and on very narrow roads like the one we're on right now. This is like the road, the old turnpike that's been here for probably 300 plus years. We're right next to the Delaware River. We're like, it's just off to our right. And then there's like the Delaware River Canal, 20 feet to our right. The river's maybe 100 feet to our right. And so this is a very, very narrow road, as you can see. But the truck handles just fine. And to our surprise, for a live axle truck, the steering doesn't have a lot of slop. It's pretty tight. You don't exactly have any on-center feel, but at least it's not all over the place and just kind of wandering like our old 06 Ram 3500, which was a four-wheel drive with the Cummins. That thing did not want to steer in a straight line. And so on the highway, it was dreadful. It was a total nightmare. But this thing, again, despite the fact that it doesn't have a lot of on-center feel, at least it's relatively tight in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of slop either. And so you can keep it pointed in the straight direction and without having to make tons and tons of corrections. The other thing I'll say about towing with this truck on the subject of steering is that it does not do the steering for you. The lane centering system is disabled when you've got a trailer hitched up and plugged into the 7-pin or the 4-pin connector. And this is the second trailer we've attached to this truck. We had our little 3,000 pound 12-foot bumper pull earlier, maybe during the weekend, can't remember when, a couple days ago, and it handled that trailer just fine. But it's actually getting 12.3 miles to the gallon over the course of today's trip, which is 76 miles. And with a 5,000 pound 28-foot gooseneck trailer, it's getting about the same mileage that it did with a fuel mileage that it did with a 3,000 pound 12-foot trailer, which was a conventional, a bumper pull. And that comes down to the fact that a gooseneck trailer, if you've got like a tapered nose or a V nose, a gooseneck trailer is actually surprisingly aerodynamic. It sort of overlaps with the look how tight this bridge is. It overlaps with the bed of the truck. That's the Delaware Canal there. Jesus Christ. Those towing mirrors do a lot of good for you. Do a whole lot of good for you. But the trailer like integrates and it overlaps with the bed of the truck very smoothly, to the point where, like, aerodynamically speaking, it's almost it almost becomes like one unit. And it's not like there's a big gap where the bed of the truck is. And you see how close we are to the water. We're like right up against it now. And so you have pretty good aerodynamics with a gooseneck trailer. Again, a tapered nose or a V nose. And so 12.3 miles to the gallon in heavy traffic, a lot of stop and go traffic. It's pretty much always rush hour in southeastern Pennsylvania, like the Philadelphia suburbs. 12.3 mpgs is actually highly respectable with all that stopping and starting that we're doing. You know, we're not getting a ton of speed up, so you don't have like a lot of aerodynamic drag, but you're having to stop and start a huge amount of weight over and over and over again. And again, the truck does a good job. The 6.7 Power Stroke, it's got a huge amount of power and torque. It'll put on the speed very, very quickly without hesitation. And you don't have to rev the daylights out of it. You don't really have to pay attention to what gear it's in, hardly at all. It just takes care of business. You don't have to monitor the RPMs and like you do with the 3.0 Power Stroke. And again, the gauges and the control layout, very, very helpful, and it minimizes the distractions. You got that nice big 12-inch screen with the full screen CarPlay for your navigation. The gauge cluster is very, very well laid out, with everything you need right there in front of you. I much prefer this layout to the standard one that comes where like about a quarter of the screen is filled up with that big tachometer dial, the big digital tachometer dial, and this one's a lot smaller, but it's actually better calibrated, so you can see your, 1500 versus 1250 versus 1750 on the RPMs. And if you have to go without actual real analog gauges, this is not a bad way to do it, because again, you get all that information there: your boost, your engine brake, your exhaust filter, meaning your DPF gauge, and your def gauge on the left. And in the middle, you can put whatever you want in the middle. We happen to have the trip odometer there. And then on the right, you're pretty much always going to have that fake speedometer dial with the digital readout. And that's in your gauge cluster. And then up ahead of you, you can't really see it too well, but you got your heads-up display. I'll try to zoom in on it for you. I guess you can see it there. Very, very clear during the daytime, at least to the driver, if not on the camera. It's got those little brackets that pop up to your left and right, meaning the truck is identifying the lane dividers to the best extent that it can. It shows you speedometer, it shows you your speed limit sign, so on and so forth. That's the standard gauge, the standard version. There's also a tow haul version of the odometer. I mean the heads-up display, and there's also an off-road version, and we've showed you that in another video. And again, that heads-up display works extremely well. Gonna point out again that the ride on this thing it's got a very stiff ride. You got no doubt that you're in a heavy-duty pickup with a heavy-duty suspension, with a 14,000-pound GVW. the capacities on this thing are huge. The front axle goes to 5,500 pounds, or maybe 5,600, I should say. The rear axle goes to 9,900. And you feel every single bump. You feel every single pavement irregularity. And everything in your little cup holders and cargo pockets and cubbies is getting rattled and bounced around. Your drink, you do not want to have an open, like, Coke bottle or soda can, because it's going to get bounced and splashed all over the place. You also don't want to open a Coke bottle or soda can after you've been driving in this thing for a while, because it's going to be all shook up and it's going to explode on you. Again, sorry about that noise. I think they tore up the pavement here because they're getting ready to resurface it, and you can just hear all that vibration. But towing a trailer, it does very, very well. It does exceptionally well. The Pro Power on board, it's so nice to have that outlet there in the bed. And if you've got a trailer that's wired for AC power, you can just plug it right in the bed, and it's done. The truck, when you turn it on, it's going to tell you, hey, you've got something plugged in the bed. Do you want to run power to it? Do you want to put the truck in a generator mode and start running 2 kilowatts of AC power to it? Or do you want to not run any power at all to that outlet? And it's kind of nice that it gives you that choice. What's annoying, though, is that it won't let you shift out of park until you make a choice. Like, until you acknowledge that that there's something plugged into the outlet. And I guess to be honest, it's not the dumbest idea. What it's trying to do is make sure you don't drive off with an extension cord plugged in for some electrical device or appliance that's, like, not in the truck. So maybe you're using the truck as a portable generator on your job site, and you got your table saw plugged in and a bunch of other stuff. No, it doesn't want you to get in the truck and drive off and start dragging all that stuff behind you. So in that respect, yeah, it is helpful. But at the same time, every single time you put the vehicle in park, you've got the trailer plugged into it the whole time. The trailer's AC power cord. And it's not smart enough to know. It doesn't stop and think, oh yeah, that same trailer with that same AC power cord is still plugged in. It's gonna make you acknowledge every single time that you got something plugged in the bed before it lets you shift out of park. Okay, what else? Again, on the it's a glaring weakness as far as we're concerned. The fact that that the truck disables lane centering, otherwise known as self-driving, when you've got a trailer hitched up, because the lane centering system on this Ford pickup and on the F-150 is one of the, it's, if not the single greatest advancement in driver safety or vehicle safety in the last 20 years. I'll just go ahead and say, yes, it is. In at least the last decade, if not the last 20 years, the lane centering system is the most dramatic improvement in driver safety that we've ever experienced. And the first time we experienced it was in the Tesla that we owned for about 2.5 years. I mean, because it reduces your workload and your fatigue level and your, like, mental strain level by like 90+%. And on a long drive, like the type that we take the type that we tend to take, which is 8, 10, 11 hours a day, that makes a huge difference. And that means the driver isn't going to be exhausted and tired and worn out, and you're not going to start making bad decisions or have like decision fatigue or have like mental fatigue after a long day. And so the fact that Ford disables it when you plug in a trailer, which is really when you need it most, it's a huge disappointment. And we know why they did it.
1,000 feet. Turn right.
Clearly they did it because their lawyers don't want to start getting sued when some dude with some hot shotter with a gigantic load of cars, like
Turn right.
an auto transporter with like 5 cars on it, gets into an accident.
In a quarter mile, turn left.
And it comes out that the lane centering system was engaged. And then Ford starts getting sued, or the driver's insurance company or somebody starts getting sued because, well, maybe the driver wasn't paying attention. And now a school bus with 26 kindergartners got run off the road. And to be honest, like, that's the lawyers making decisions for the company, and those are bad decisions because, again, the time when you need a driver assistance system the most is when you're in a condition like that. When you got a big, heavy trailer hitched up and you're driving all day with it. That's the time when lane centering does the most good for you, because it keeps you from accidentally drifting out of your lane. It keeps you centered in your lane. And doing more of a supervisory type job than when you're driving and having to spend every single second of every minute of the day keeping it centered in the lane yourself. It's just annoying. The technology is there to help you, but because somebody was paranoid and afraid of a lawsuit, and maybe they'd heard about Tesla getting sued, they disabled the system. Huge disappointment. Now, there's a way around it that is both safe and legal, and that will let you use your lane centering system while you've got a trailer hitched up. And it doesn't involve driving with the trailer unplugged, which is not safe or legal. But we'll discuss that some other time. Again, other than that very disappointing decision on the part of Ford to disable lane centering while you're towing. This thing tows like a champ. This thing tows exceptionally well. It's got the puck system in the back, and we showed it to you during our overview. And the puck system is great because you don't have to go, after you buy your brand new truck, and go and get that B&W turnover ball system installed in it, and spend another, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 waiting for that, and a bunch of time waiting for that to get installed. It's ready to go from the factory. And we've got the B&W ball hitch kit with the two little anchors for your chains, and we installed that, and it took all of about 2 minutes. Very easy to figure out. Brilliant system. The B&W costs $300, and there's other kits you can get that cost like $150 or $200. And on paper, I guess they get the job done. But the B&W, the way it has that handle that lets you lift the ball out of the hitch without having to get your hand all greasy, that's kind of nice. And the other system that we bought, and again, we'll show it to you at some other time. The other system has like the locking connector that locks the ball in place built into the actual surface of the ball, which means it's going to get covered with grease and it's going to get all nasty, and who knows how long it's going to last. And so that's clearly not the way to do it. The B&W system seems to be the best. Although, again, it costs about $300 compared to maybe $200 for another version. Nothing else to say. We got no complaints about this thing. The exhaust brake works well. It doesn't work fantastic, but it works well enough. The engine makes tons and tons of power. The fuel mileage is, again, very, very good. 12.5 in heavy traffic. With this same trailer, our 2011 Duramax, mostly on the highway, got 13.5. And our 2021 F-150 with the Power Stroke gets about, let's just say 16.5 to around 18 on the highway. So a much heavier vehicle, this one here, in much less pleasant conditions in stop and go traffic. Getting 12.5 mpgs is not bad at all, and we'll take it. But other than those observations, we don't have much to add. The transmission, as we mentioned earlier, it gets good and hot. Not sure how well you can see that. The engine itself is at 190 and the transmission is at 206. That's a lot hotter than we're used to. In the Duramax, the transmission rarely gets above 175. And that's because it's got an air-to-water transmission cooler, a conventional transmission cooler. This truck, the 6.7 Power Stroke with the 10-speed automatic, has like a water-to-water transmission cooler, and the transmission fluid gets cooled off by the engine coolant. And so it's never going to be colder than the engine coolant. Like the 192 there that you see for the coolant temp is the coolest that the transmission is ever going to get. Because it's generating more heat, mostly at the torque converter. And so the fact is that it's just going to be running 200 plus degrees, and you just have to not be alarmed by that. Somebody said that the reason it does that, a reason it does that, is to boil off any water, any condensation that might have gotten into the transmission fluid, and prevent water from flowing around in your transmission, causing rust and who knows what other problems. And so that's the explanation, and we'll take it. If it's built to run that hot, then it's not an issue. Okay, nothing much else to add, but after 7 days with this truck and about 700 miles, it's running great, and we're very happy with it. Exceptionally happy with it in most ways, almost every way, aside from a couple of little issues we've got here and there, and they're minor and they're not really consequential. Sorry about all the glare, by the way, from the sunlight. All right, well, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.